1991, Jeff McBride told me that he wanted to sponsor and organize a small magic convention for the following spring of 1992. Because of the site chosen, an ashram in upstate New York, less than 30 people could be accommodated, and so Jeff decided to invite various people that he already knew, magicians who had expressed an interest in magic's history, mythology and symbolism, ritual and performance. Several names for the 4-day event were suggested. The name Mystery School was finally chosen, both because it harkened back to the mystery schools of ancient Greece and Rome, which were concerned, among other things, with spiritual initiation into wisdom, and also because mystery, in and of itself, as well as putting the mystery back into magic performances, was also an interest shared by the people Jeff had invited. Jeff asked me to give 2 talks. Keeping with the general themes already stated, I decided the first talk would be on the subject seeking a magical vision, and the second would extend that theme with the topic empowering our vision. Later, a third short talk that led into a group discussion on the subject of altered states of consciousness and magic was added to the schedule. I must tell you that this really was the most wonderful magic event I have ever attended in my life. At last, a group of magicians, both professional and amateur, young and old, women and men, who were interested in something more than how magic tricks work. Quite amazing indeed. Sessions were held on magic and storytelling, stage movement, the contributions of Sam Sharp, especially in his book Neo-Magic, the symbolism of the major arcana of the Tarot, as well as extensive periods of shamanic drumming and other rituals whose meaning and nature must remain secret because of a vow of silence taken by all present. Can you imagine that? A group of magicians taking a vow of silence and secrecy about anything. I thought it was perfectly refreshing. I tell you all this recent history for the following reason. On the plane, as I was flying back to Chicago after the conclusion of the Mystery School, I began wondering whether subjects such as these, finding and empowering a magical vision, would be of interest to a larger number of magicians. And so I decided to include some of these reflections in the talks for this series of recordings. I can't, of course, recreate the talks from the Mystery School. They weren't recorded at the time, nor would I want to reproduce the talks, even if I could, because the original talks were specifically tailored to a rather specific and exceptional magical event. But the question raised by all this still remains for each of us. Namely, are we seeking a magical vision, a vision of our own, a personal vision, or are we simply relying on other people's visions, which come to us out of the past? In one sense, you see, the question of seeking a magical vision is the question of whether our magic is grounded in the present, or, on the other hand, whether our magic is simply reproducing the past and repeating yesterday. I think it is important to realize that this quest for one's own personal magical vision in life is older than written history. It is, in fact, a spiritual bond that joins us to those who came before us. It links us to our most remote ancestors out of the past. For some of these men and women, too, sought a magical vision, a vision that would inspire, confound, mystify, and finally heal. The shamans, who existed for tens of thousands of years before the historical religions appeared, and who still exist today, are the magician healers of the society. To be a shaman, to achieve the power necessary to fulfill this quite awesome role, the would-be initiate, the shaman-to-be, needed to separate himself or herself from the group, to go off alone on what many of them called a vision quest. For the shamans, the purpose of this vision quest was to unite with various spirits, with animal spirits and spirits of place, spirits of the earth and the sky, and even spirits of the underworld, and to become endowed with their wisdom and healing power. You might say that, while all this is fairly interesting, it's rather remote from contemporary magic, as well as from real everyday life as we live it in the last decade of the 20th century. It may surprise you, but I don't think seeking a vision is a remote issue at all. I think it is a subject that has fascinated and guided people since the earliest of times. My friend Jack Gould recently was reading studies about leadership within the military and the arts, and even among top-level corporate executives. What do you think was the quality most often named as being valued in a leader? Do you think it was shrewdness, or personal magnetism, or managerial skill, or even compassion? What do you think people look for in a leader? The quality at the top of the list was vision. Well, how can we specifically relate this question of seeking a magical vision to some of the concerns of contemporary magicians? I think the way is something like this. If I see finally the utter futility of imitating other magicians or stealing their original work, if I see this so deeply that the seeing is action, and I no longer want any part of that kind of imitating and stealing, well, how then can I find my own magical vision? How can I find the vision to present my own repertoire in a way that does justice to the material as well as doing justice to me, to the person that I am perceived to be, and also justice to the person that I really am? Isn't it amazing that so little in our involvement with contemporary magic has prepared us to answer such questions? Our involvement with magic, all the books and magazines that we read, the magic shows that we see and ourselves present, all of this gives us very little preparation for dealing with such important questions. Our heads are constantly being stuffed with new methods for tricks and with other magic gossip, but little of this offers us real guidance as we travel the path of seeking our own magical vision, our own special place in the art of magic. Just as the ancient shaman used tools to achieve his magical vision, the drum for intensive periods of drumming, songs, breathing exercises, hallucinogenic plants, so a modern magician who seeks to uncover a vision of his or her own unique individuality also has tools, even if they seem on the surface to be much more mundane. First, there is the notebook, in which are recorded ideas, notes for magical effects, jokes, themes for presentations, whatever seems of interest at the time. Writing down our ideas as they come to us, even if we only briefly note them, is important. It is equally important that we regularly page through our notebooks and reflect upon what we have collected. I think a notebook really is a tool of crucial importance, because in our notebook we record our magical dreams. And dreams and the visualization of these dreams has always been at the center of magical activity. Along with the notebook to record our thoughts and dreams, our goals in magic, there are also other important tools, such as the regular use of a mirror for practice, or video or audio recording, and then periods of quiet and rational evaluation of what we are doing, what we have recorded. All of these things are not simply ideas or suggestions. They need to be recognized as tools to aid us in our magical work. If we are serious, if we're sincere, we will gratefully use these tools. You might wish that I would now tell you exactly how to seek and attain your own magical vision, this vision of your own special place in the magical spectrum. If this is your wish, do you see that it is a false wish? Because no one can tell you that. No one can tell anyone how to attain their own vision. No one can tell us how to travel what is essentially a deeply personal, even spiritual path. One can only raise the question. One cannot answer it for another. You might ask, well, what point is there in raising a question that cannot be answered? Isn't it in fact rather stupid to spend our time in this way? I don't agree. Unanswerable questions point us to the real mysteries in life, and one of these mysteries has always been the mystery of receiving a vision of one's place in one's craft, or a vision of one's place in life itself. We cannot force or compel such a magical vision into existence. We may be able to buy magic tricks or magic books, but we cannot purchase the vision that will guide us to use them wisely. No act of will, no act of effort can bring this vision to us. All we can do is use the tools for seeking our vision and wait. We must wait for a vision that may never come. But for the person who waits, the act of waiting itself comes to have an inner meaning, a spiritual dimension. The one who seeks and waits for a magical vision is not the same person who is concerned with how magic tricks work. The one who seeks and waits for a vision, for an inspiration, understands the deep sense of what it has always been to follow a craft. At first, perhaps, we must be satisfied with partial visions, with mere glimpses, and sometimes these seem essentially negative. For instance, I watch other magicians and I slowly begin to see what I don't want to be. I see their attitude in dealing with people, and I may say to myself, this is not the attitude I want to have. And in the process, the rough lines of a sense of who I am begin to appear. Not a full vision, but a partial one. Then I watch the audience's reactions to things. What do they like in a performer? What bores them? I ask myself, is it the lines that make the performer work, or the performer who makes the lines work? I look at these things. To look at them, to ask these questions of ourselves, requires great dedication. All craft requires great dedication. And if you don't have that kind of energy to give, or if you don't want to make the necessary sacrifices to give it, perhaps you should look for a hobby, like collecting magic books or apparatus. Collecting magic's past objects, a wonderful endeavor, but it really has very little in common with working in a craft such as magic. Collecting things is a hobby. Magic is a craft, a performance craft that from beginning to end involves you as the performer. I mentioned the word sacrifice a moment ago. It's a rough word, a word that we don't like to hear, a word we would rather ignore. Most of us are less interested in making sacrifices and much more interested in immediate gratification and pleasure. As Leonard Cohen says in one of his songs, we are locked into our sufferings, and our pleasures are the seal. But let's be realistic. Don't you think that, like any craftsperson in any craft, you will need to make sacrifices of your time, energy, attention, and money. Our time is limited. Our energy is limited. Our money is limited. And our attention is scattered over so many things rather than focused on our craft. So our attention is limited too. The only way out of this is the way of conscious sacrifice, where I decide, first of all, how much I want to succeed in magic, and second, how much of my time, energy, attention, and money I'm willing to set aside to fulfill that dream. Will you make these sacrifices? And if you do, in what spirit will you make them? Will you make them in the spirit of resentment, inner anger, or will you make the necessary sacrifices for your craft with joy and even with love? There's a rather important Buddhist teaching that has an interesting application here. It is called right association. In Buddhism, as you may know, there is the Eightfold Path. The path, Buddhists say, lead to enlightenment. This path has 8 steps: right views, right intent, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and finally right concentration. What is interesting here is that even before one officially begins the Eightfold Path, there is a preliminary step called right association. It is important, the Buddhists teach, that we associate with people who understand and encourage our dreams. It certainly is important, I think, that we associate with other magicians who themselves want to grow in the art of magic, as opposed to associating with magicians who drain our energy, who are themselves imitators and thieves, or who inhibit growth in those around them. If we look at it, I think this Buddhist teaching of right association is what I would call a hard teaching, and to follow it may require some painful and difficult sacrifices. Friendships are wonderful things, aren't they? We all treasure our close friends. In terms of seeking our own personal vision in magic, our friends, especially our magician friends, can be hindrances to our growth, as well as aids and helps. This brings us to one of the most difficult things of all, learning to trust our own vision, even if it is partial, and not simply listening to what others tell us to do. In magic, all magicians have endless opinions about everything. If you tried to listen to all of them, you'd probably go crazy. It would be simply impossible. I believe that it is less important who you listen to, and more important that you also listen to yourself, trusting even your own partial vision, rather than simply accepting what everyone else tells you to do. Trusting our own vision, even when it is a partial vision, is one of the most difficult things for all of us to do in life. We are also conditioned to accept what the outside authority tells us. And if there isn't an outside authority, we make one up. We invent one. Consequently, learning to trust ourselves more is a great and important step along the path of growth for us. This brings me to the last thing I want to discuss. It may strike you as a rather strange question, namely, do you believe in magic words? Most magicians talk about magic words, and some of them even say magic words in their performances. But do we believe in magic words? Really believe in them? Well, to be honest with you, I do believe that our words, our thoughts, can empower us, or they can keep us weak and powerless. I think quite sincerely that there are both words and even places of power. Here's the same question, the question of magic words put differently. What song are you singing? What inner song occupies most of your thoughts? If you truly want to seek and empower your own personal magical vision, it is important that your inner song be a song of power, rather than any one of the negative inner songs that most of us are singing much of the time. What do I mean by a negative inner song? Well, one of the most popular ones is the inner song, I can't. By telling ourselves that we can't succeed, we disempower ourselves. Other negative songs include, what if? Or, it won't work. Or, if it's a good idea, why did I get it? We're talking to ourselves inwardly much of the time. Are we reinforcing our dreams with these inner reveries? Or are we simply catching ourselves in the web of negative thought? My interest over the years in the power of negative thought, its power to limit our options in life and thereby to make us less capable than we are, gave me a new appreciation for the insights of Émile Coué, the French pharmacist who died in 1926, and who urged people to recite the phrase, day by day in every way I am better and better. He said to do it 20 times a day. Most people think that Coué's prescription is rather superficial, even stupid. My view is just the opposite. Coué understood, as I explained in my book, The Performance of Close-Up Magic, that our inner lives now are not in balance. Inwardly, we are out of balance because most of us are giving ourselves negative suggestions, negative reinforcement most of the time. We learn to do this at a very early age, perhaps by imitating parents who are themselves caught up in negative thought. It takes very little time for this kind of behavior to become perfectly habitual, so that we are being inwardly negative without even thinking about it. Coué's phrase, day by day in every way I am better and better, was meant to restore some balance. And his idea was for us to give ourselves this positive suggestion to offset the ever-present habitual negative suggestions of powerlessness that we're giving ourselves. Let me tell you of a personal experience. Some years ago, while I was performing in California, I discovered that Federal Express had lost the corrected copy of my book, The Experience of Magic, which I had sent to Richard Kaufman, the publisher, and I didn't have another copy. According to Richard, the company was, indeed, exceedingly concerned about their misplacement, but the bottom line was that they couldn't locate it. It was, I should say, eventually found in Minneapolis, where it had gone by mistake, but that happened 3 months after the book appeared in print. But at the time, Richard sent me another copy to begin the correction process again. The feeling that I could never remember or catch all of the changes that I had so carefully put in left me in a rather strange and frustrated mental state. I felt I was facing a task that was truly hopeless. Whatever I did now in the way of corrections would still be not as good as what I had originally done. The whole situation was making me totally depressed and negative. It was coloring my daily attitude, my outlook on life itself. The more I sang my inner song of powerlessness, the more I remained unable to even begin the admittedly unpleasant job of doing the corrections over again. My inner song was paralyzing me. I fretted every day, but I didn't even pick up the manuscript in a pen. Perhaps I would still be fretting, except for something said to me by my friend Alan Kelly, one of the many wonderful people I have met at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, who has become a close friend. One of the things I've always appreciated about Kelly is his down-to-earth wisdom about things. After I told him how depressed I was because of the lost manuscript and what had become in my mind the now impossible task of correcting it again, Kelly said, "Here's what I do. Tomorrow morning when you take a shower, say out loud, 'I give myself permission to be powerful.' Say it 20 times and see how you feel when you say it." At the time, I probably insincerely thanked him and smiled. The next morning, however, while I was taking a shower, the phrase jumped into my mind, and I did say it 20 times out loud, and I was attentive to how I felt when I said it. And the morning after that, I repeated the ritual again, and again on the third morning. In fact, I still periodically repeat these words, and they still take me out of my own negative thought and bring me back to my senses. These words, I give myself permission to be powerful, have been for me magic words. They're an inward song, but a song not of weakness, but of power. And so I leave you with these questions. What inner song are you singing most of the time? Is your inner song a song of weakness? Is it a song that makes you less capable than you are? Or is your inner song a truly magical song, a song of strength and power?